Hello, and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and we are exploring the oxidizing pictures, and we are exploring Socrates' own philosophical / spiritual development. Let me just change one more setting on my audio super quick. Last time we did a pretty thorough review of the hypotheses of Parmenides. That gives us a map for possible stages of human development, which incorporate ways of thinking. How do you think about the world? How do you think about yourself? Possible states of mind. If you think a certain way about yourself and the world, what feelings do you get? What's the state of mind? Kinds of functioning. What can you achieve and what will you be blocked from achieving? And of course, all of those are tied to different ideas of one. Based on, well, if the things that you relate to in the world are things, then they are one thing. Depending on the kind of level of one that you can understand, that would limit your ability to think about that thing. For instance, if you don't think that there can be any one that exists eternally, all ones are just physical parts that decompose, that grow and decompose in the physical world, then, well, if you don't have that kind of one in your language, then you can't imagine that yourself or mind or reality can be eternal or more than just a physical part. See how it keeps you trapped in a certain way of thinking about things? And it limits your possible experiences if one of our goals is to know our mind. The second hypothesis or stage of soul's development, and the mind is eternal, but you can't imagine a kind of one that is eternal, or you're certain that the highest kind of one is a part, physical one, then how can you reach that? And of course, we want to get to the self. We want to return to the source even of mind to know the self. And if that is a kind of one that transcends existence, well, we better nail down in our understanding that first hypothesis so we have a kind of one we can apply to the self so that we can be open to knowing the self. And should we encounter the self, notice encounter, not experience, because it's beyond even experience. If we do encounter the self, we better have that idea of one tied to the self so we can recognize that idea of one as us recognizing ourselves, which is the first hypothesis. It's the idea of one, the highest, according to Parmenides, and tying it to the self, the one self. So with these, Socrates goes over, reviews them 3 different times in 3 different ways, giving us what we need to reflect on this map of soul development, the hypotheses, in the book that has been called the greatest book never read, because if it's every possible way of thinking, that would include every possible religion, or cult, or political group, or culture that can come into existence. So since the conversation between Parmenides and Socrates, there have been many terrible cults and religions and political systems that have come into existence that have caused so much suffering that we could have avoided had we been reading this book. As they come into existence, we could all as a culture and as individuals say, oh, by the way, that's number 4, or that's number 7. We can understand it. We can understand what it would be like if you lived in that way of thinking, how it would feel, how you would relate to different things, including relationships, what your limits would be, what possible states of enlightenment you can and cannot be open to, and why it's not true. Because it's a part within a greater whole. What the next stage could be if you did end up raised in that family or culture, so you could make a stepwise movement. But there are also different kinds of movements you can make. As we saw last time, Socrates says that you could arrange the, putting the first hypothesis aside, the next 8 hypotheses, you could arrange them as 4 and 4, reflecting the structure of the dialectic, which is the structure of the logos, which is our method, understanding. Understanding or aligning our own way of thinking with the patterns of reality, the intelligible patterns, structure, harmony of reality. So you could arrange them side by side. These 4, if the one self exists in different kinds of ways, what would be the implications? Its existence, its functioning, knowing, or pure ousia, knowing mind as being, its functioning, the providential functioning of the greatest intelligence that happens through the gap, which functions that we can access through the dialectic, the art or skill of understanding, its distorted shadow, belief, and the distorted shadow of understanding. So the distorted shadow of knowing, belief, I know it because, well, you were indoctrinated into it. Jesus is in my heart, or I know it because the Torah says so. And the distorted functioning of understanding, to use your thinking to reject your own development. Dualism. There's no mind connection with body. Everything is just physical stuff. Get your bag and who cares what happens along the way. Make hand grenades and nuclear weapons, and who's to say whether we should or shouldn't. Materialism. Notice it only acts. Both of these act in conflict with our actual development. Why would we spend your thinking, reasoning, words to reject the development of that skill of thinking, reasoning, and words? Why would you oppose understanding? True understanding of the third hypothesis. That's what we do. That's what humans do when they're in their problems. So each of those 4 you can reject or deny the existence of. So these are what follows if the self exists. By the way, the true self or source doesn't exist. So all of these are kinds of reflections and not true self, because that's the first, according to Parmenides. But if it does exist, you have these implications. But if you deny them, you get the negative set of 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And Socrates pointed out, by the way, if you understand them, you read the greatest book never read. Nail down a dialect, and by the way, we've been seeing that the way we understand things is look for that dialectical structure. Like a puzzle, solve a puzzle, and talk about it, reflect about it with your friends, make it your own to the point where you can see through it. If you do that, ride the ox, master your mind, well, use understanding to nail down these 4, any of these negative positions, actually you can see necessitate the existence of the thing it's denying. So not only can you make a stepwise movement through these hypotheses as stages of development, you can jump across. We also saw that you can draw a line of symmetry, like that. Does this do anything? My camera? Does this do anything? Yeah. Hooray. So if you could see the 4th belief as a distorted reflection of knowing, Let's take an example. Let's say you grew up in a religion where the highest idea of one is not a part, that would be lower, but a whole of parts, people getting together in groups, a Trump rally or a mega church or something, and singing Kumbaya to Trump or Jesus or whoever. Then you think that there is some sort of divine holy thing. It's just beyond you, and the closest you can do is pray and hope you get there when you die. What if somebody comes along and says, have you heard of this thing called meditation or dialectic? Or dream analysis? These are sort of activities you can do that might allow you to actually experience these things that you were told you can't experience. So you can make a jump from the fourth to the second, from its reflection to its source. So those are a list of possible jumps you can make, given the stage of development you are at as a soul, potentially, at least as a working hypothesis. Yesterday, someone came into the chat and said, how does math relate to this, to philosophy? What if we recognized that baked into the logos, or the dialectic structure of reality, the unfolding of self, unfolding the inherent understandability of the self, the inherent intelligibility or logos of self, what if baked into that were these stages of reflection, its rejections, that living beings like us as human souls, going through their reincarnation journey, can move through? Well, that would imply that there is a principle of movement. And perhaps those three kinds of movements. What we've been looking at recently is, what do we call the ability to move from one thing to another? If they are distinct, different stages, how do we change? How do we move? How do we grow? We've been talking about the mean analogy. The method. The mean analogy for us, how do we go from ignorance to wisdom? Through understanding, through the dialectic. How do we become like Parmenides, who wrote these hypotheses? Or Diotima, who can apply them as a teacher, as a guru, to help others through their own developmental process, like she did with Socrates? How can we become like Socrates as teachers, Parmenides or Diotima? By listening to Socrates, by reading Socrates. So Socrates is the mean term within an analogy of extremes. There's us on this end as learning noodles, and then there are these mega noodles who've reached their journey, reached the end. How do we become like them? Through the mean term. So mean analogy is a necessary principle for development. For innate, hang on a second. How would you represent the kinds of mean analogies, thumbs up, that would facilitate those different kinds of jumps or movements or developments that we've mentioned? Well, you need three at least. Three different kinds of mean analogies. How would you talk about them? Well, we can talk about them with examples, like Diotima is to Socrates as Socrates is to us. But you could also use numbers. For example, 2 is to 4, double, as 4 is to 8. So because 4 is the lesser term in the first, the greater 2 is to 4. Well, If we're thinking about hypotheses, we 2 is the greater, 2 is to 4. Oh, like the second hypothesis is the source of 4 its reflection, as 4 is to 8. Ooh. Another kind of reflection, 4 is to 8. It's rejection, it's denial in the 8th hypothesis. So you can use numbers to talk about analogies. And the good thing about that is using numbers is you can distinguish the different kinds of jumps. 2 is to 4 is 4 is to 8, double, is different from 2 is to 4, 4 is to 6. Still works. One is multiplicate. Oh dear Lord, I don't want to become one of those memes. Multiplication. Fuck.
Oh my fuck.
Multiplication. I found where I can put the L. Multiplication. Got there.
They're secretly turned on by it.
You turn on by this? You freaks.
Oh my fuck.
Oh my fuck, you freaks. So it still works because 2 plus 2 is 4 and 4 plus 2 is 6. It's a mean term because 4 is the lesser of the first and the greater of the second. Just like Socrates is the lesser, the student, to the teacher, and then becomes the teacher to the student. So, if baked into the unfolding of reality is an unfolding through some sort of mean term, from the extremes to its, from the higher to the lesser, from the source, the self, to us as souls in ignorance, having to address our pathologos beliefs from childhood to go from ignorance to... How do we make that movement from ignorance to knowing or self or wisdom? Equally so, how does one unfold to the other? That's the third hypothesis Socrates points out, because the way the one self and its reflection, divine luminosity, functions to help us is through the gap in each moment. So the two kinds of sources, the source as self and the source of intelligence, mind, can function providentially through the gap. That's represented as the third hypothesis of Parmenides. The first is the self, the second is being or mind or intelligence, and the third is the providential functioning of those things as understanding that we can participate in through the dialectic, giving us the 1, 2, 3 hypotheses: self, being, and understanding. The triad, or the threesome of self, Socrates calls it. And if the fourth hypothesis is where ignorance starts, belief, then we can see within this map where we are as an evolving species. If human suffering and problems are boiled down to the root cause, pathologos belief, individually, that's just venerated or made into, pretended to be a universal principle. It's not me that thinks Jews are the best and need to rule everyone. It's God that says it. It's not me that says we're a better, more privileged family because we have all the millionaires, all the dollars. We've hoarded all the wealth, exploited other people. It's capitalism that says it. It's not me that says that we should terrorize the American citizens. It's MAGA that says it. So, politics, capitalism, and our education system, all of these systems suffer from ignorance to the level that they project the pathologos beliefs, or the fourth hypothesis, as though they were the actual principles, the second. See, the distorted reflection of the second. So we can understand the nature of human problems and suffering through these hypotheses of Parmenides and seeing their analogical relationships. And we can move from the lesser to the greater through the mean analogies. Mean analogies sounded a little bit like Christopher Walken there.
Wow.
Meaning, there has to be something baked into the system that we are a part of, that we wake up in, that allows for those kinds of mean analogies to facilitate that kind of movement. And if there are those three kinds of jumps, we could find the necessary numbers that can represent those three kinds of analogical movements and make them into a set. You could say, well, hang on a second, we've got that multiplication. Ooh, nailed it.
Making ice cream's a good and courageous thing.
I'm gonna get rid of that. I'm sick of Emma telling me about ice cream and pools and peanuts.
The more holes, the better.
See, that's a nice one.
Wow.
You just attacked my person. You just harmed my body.
Whoops, sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that by insulting Emma.
Wrong. You're so wrong.
Wrong.
But that's okay. We're all allowed to be wrong sometimes.
Phew. Multiplication, 2 is to 4 is 4 is to 8. You could call that a geometric analogy. Why? I don't know why that's what it's called. I think it's because it's a I think it's to do with 2 dimensions. Like when you want to find the area of a square. I don't know. Like length times width. Now that stepwise, 2 is to 4 is 4 is to 6, or 1 is to 2 is 2 is to 3. Arithmetic. Mean analogy. Simple enough, you're adding like doing arithmetic. There's another one that's a bit more fancy. Imagine if you had, this is how I imagine it. Imagine you're a babysitter and you're babysitting 2 children. You've got a 2-year-old sitting on a couch watching Blue's Clues or K-pop Hunters. Is that what it's called? And a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. Now, you have to take care of them as the babysitter. So your question is, who do you sit closer to on the couch to take care of them? It's got to be balanced. You probably have to sit closer to the 2-year-old to make sure that if the baby falls off the couch, you can grab it and save it from hitting its head. But also, you can't be too far away from the 6-year-old, because what if the 6-year-old starts eating glue or something? I don't know. What do kids do? So, if you were to harmoniously place yourself closer to the smaller term, based on the difference in ages, where would you sit? Well, if the 6-year-old is 3 times as old as the 2-year-old, or rather, if the 2-year-old is 3 times as young, then you better sit 3 times closer to the 2-year-old. So if you've got 2, the number 2, the number 3 is 1 away from 2, but it's also 3, 4, 5, 6, lots of balloons. It's 3 away from 6. So the gap between you and the 2-year-old is 1. The gap between you and the 6-year-old is 3. So your 1 is to 3. So you're 3 times as far away from the 6-year-old as you are to the 2-year-old. But that works because the 6-year-old is 3 times as old, so you can sit 3 times as far away. Or rather, you're 3 times closer to the baby, who is 3 times younger. So 2 is to 3 is 3 is to 6. I hope that analogy helps. That's the harmonic mean analogy. Now, if you needed to create a universe where there is that kind of movement through the hypotheses as principles, just like mathematics, there's the regular mathematics uses principles like 2 and 2 is 4, which has to always exist for there to be a reality that allows us to count things, create things, and discover things. So too, these principles of movement have to be baked into reality. Therefore, there has to be a necessary set of numbers for those kinds of analogical movement, for there to be our own development as souls through that structure of hierarchy of the hypotheses. Now, if we recognize that there are 2 kinds of fundamental forces or principles of soul's development, because we have men and women who are different, face different challenges, have different balance of different aspects within their psyche or soul. We're all in the same game, we're all cells, we're all minds, we all develop understanding, and we're all moving through the hypotheses, but there's still difference between men and women. And if we were to represent women as even and men as odd numbers, to distinguish the kinds of expressions of those analogies, we would have to have a necessary set of numbers that represents those 3 kinds of jumps or movements with even numbers and odd numbers. That's what Socrates calls the necessary set of numbers. And by the way, by understanding how the one of the first hypothesis becomes the second, in other words, the second hypothesis is the one that exists. So there has to be the idea of one and existence. Already we've got 2 things, but for them to be 2 different things, you need the ideas of difference. So now you've got 3 terms: one, existence, and difference. And you can arrange these in different kinds of pairs: one and existence, one and difference. Difference and existence. So 3 arrangements of those pairs. Now we have the idea of pairs too. Got the idea of 3 different kinds of pairs. Now, if you continue the reflection on these kinds of basic elements that are necessitated for there to be existence, you'll come up with the necessary set of numbers, apparently, which are also the simplest set of numbers needed to account for those 3 types of mean analogies or analogical movements that are necessary for the kinds of movements or movements of development of souls. Necessary numbers. Now notice, there is a set number. It's finite, but it allows for the infinite generation of creation. Finite and infinite. They are parts, but they can come together as a whole and parts. Notice that's different from the kind of mathematics that we have based on the physical world. In other words, everything in the physical world is, well, infinite. So we have an infinite set of numbers, but there's no end. A different kind of expression of infinite and limit. each number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, they are a kind of limit, but it goes on infinitely. Same with space. Each point in space is a limit where you are, but it goes on infinitely. But notice, the necessary number set isn't. It's bound. A simple set, a necessary set of numbers that allow for analogical reflection into creation and our soul's analogical, through the mean analogies, movements from different stages of being, from nihilism to materialism, from materialism to belief, from belief into understanding, from understanding into, so different kinds of movements within that map. But this is the significance of what we do in philosophy. We're understanding reality as it unfolds from its cause, whereas materialists, or people in Aristotle's tradition, who've rejected the existence of mind and self, only look through their physical senses. Modern experiments, we make judgments based on what we see in our physical world, and we infer or imagine. Inductive reason, called inductive reasoning, we infer or imagine, so the I in inductive reasoning, or inferring or imagining what the principle might be. Whereas in philosophy, we go to the highest principle. We start from the necessary first causes. So in the physical world, you might say, well, when I look around the physical world, it seems that the people in charge are the most loudest and ignorant and most cruel, most cutthroat and psychopathic people become CEOs because they're most willing to exploit their workers and pollute the environment to save money. The most loud, ignorant, fascistic politicians seem to be in power, and they get away with all sorts of terrible crimes. It's the most manipulative and oppressive people that become the religious leaders, and they end up with all of the millions of dollars and able to get away with their sexual crimes as well in their private jets. So the idea of justice, from only looking at our physical senses, we could conclude is might makes right, which is of course complete injustice, the opposite of the truth. Whereas in philosophy, true philosophy, exploring the different ideas of self and one in these hypotheses to find the source of intelligence, mind, and reality, to find the source even of reality, self. By starting there and working down, we can see the true principles that are the true causes of what unfolds, giving us true ideas of justice and beauty, not based on belief or physical appearances. So too with mathematics. If our base 10 numerals number system is based on our fingers or whatever, and we create a system where 1, 2, 3, 4 and goes on forever. It allows us to do lots of things in the physical world, but won't allow us to develop, because it's while going top down, by understanding how the one self changes or develops or reflects into pure intelligence, the one that is, what principles are necessitated by that. You got the idea of 2, 1 exists, 3, 1 exists difference, 6 different ways of arranging those. 2 times 3, 6, 2 times 2, 4, 3 times 3, 9. Ending up with the necessary number set for those 3 mean analogies that do allow for our stepwise or jump movements within the hypotheses in our development. So, without an understanding of true philosophy, we're left running around killing each other in the physical world, bashing our heads against walls. But with the necessary set of numbers, it's a different number system that does give us the two expressions, masculine and feminine, or odd and even, of the three kinds of mean analogies, which allow for the three primary kinds of jumps between their hypotheses, which is the dialectic used for one of its highest possible ways to use the dialectic to nail down the order, harmony, structure of soul development. Not just our human souls, but any soul development. Any intelligent species who has evolved to the capacity for self-reflection, ousia, and understanding, logos. Notice, so that's the conditions for playing the game of development, but notice the triad of self, first, second, and third. The third is logos, so there's your language and understanding. The second is ousia, there's your self-reflection. The second and third hypothesis. So we can recognize that the fact that we are species that can reflect, we can participate in ousia. We are a species with language, we can participate in logos. All we have to do then is realize, shit, if that's what makes us special, or more evolved than caterpillars and cabbages, how do we use it most effectively? That's the dialectic, that's true philosophy. What would we end up with if we used ousia and logos most effectively? The hypotheses of Parmenides. By the way, if we have ousia and logos, there has to be some principle that has to exist for a species to crop up on Earth and crop up over here and crop up in that galaxy and crop up in that period of time and crop up in that dimension or multiverse. In other words, 2 and 2 equals 4 for everyone. So too, the principle of evolving into ousia and logos has to exist for everyone. So therefore, for there to be this adjective, ousia and logos, there has to be its substantive. In other words, for this to be a principle of evolution, ousia and logos has to exist in a more primary sense outside of time for its expression through time. That's the second and third hypothesis. That's being, pure ousia, second hypothesis, and providence, or its expression to create each moment and its communication through the gap of the third hypothesis. So the dialectic that makes use of self-reflection and logos is the art that brings together being and understanding, or knowing and understanding, ousia and logos, the two fundamental characteristics that marks our higher stage of evolution, greater than cabbages and caterpillars, and culminates in its highest excellence, second and third hypothesis. There's one more thing that's involved. We make use of self-reflection and understanding. By the way, the terms used in the dialectic and logos we call the selfers, because we're not talking about beauty as a physical experience, we're talking about beauty itself. So notice self-reflection, self-beauty, self-whole, self-parts. So that for there to be logos or understanding, that necessitates its source, self. For there to be the principle or idea of beauty itself. You, listener, yourself. Chicken itself. And what makes us special than this chicken, who can't ever wonder about its chickenness, is our ability for self-reflection. So ousia and logos, knowing and understanding, together we call that wisdom, presupposes a higher source, self, giving us the necessity for the first hypothesis. The self of the first, ousia or mind or being as the second, Logos or understanding as the third, the three expressions of self that come together as the ideal threesome or triad, which is what Socrates just said when we just read. Therefore, the mean term that allows us to make use of ousia and logos to make those analogical jumps in higher stages of development is the dialectic. Therefore, it's our purpose to make use of it. It's our purpose or duty as evolving species. It's because it's necessary. It's necessary not only for our movement, but it's necessary that that be the meaning of life or purpose or destiny for all evolving beings, because it's the skill that makes use of those two things that we've evolved into. So it can't not be the meaning of life to develop the skill and mastery of dialectic, which will end up with us recreating the hypotheses of Parmenides and applying it to go through those stages of development to ultimately awaken the third hypothesis, know ourselves as being, and reach the source, the self, which is, of course, Parmenides. So Socrates' teacher Parmenides and Diotima, we will become ourselves. So here is us recognizing that if we use the mean term of dialectic, we can be, that we've learned by listening to Socrates in this book, we become just like Parmenides and Diotima. We will see for ourselves that the highest use of understanding in terms of creating a model or map is to map the stages of human development, all intelligent development, including cultures, states of mind. That's the hypothesis of Parmenides. Also helps to recognize the movements using that necessary number set, the kinds of mean analogy jumps that we can make, and utilize it like Diotima. Ideally, how do we make use of the dialectic? You got to talk to someone. Diotima showed how the ideal kinds of relationships, love and logos, allow us to make use of our understanding of the hypotheses, make use of the dialectic in the highest possible way. So the highest possible activity, the dialectic. The highest possible art, the dialectic. The highest possible use of that art to transition through these hypotheses in relationships, talking with people, that's the dialectic, which is the skill of understanding. So that allows us to perfect the third hypothesis, to purify our false beliefs. That's the fourth hypothesis that keeps us stuck in our problems. That is also the mean analogy to reach the second hypothesis. So from fourth through third to second, sounds like an arithmetic mean analogy. From the fourth belief, human pathologos ignorance, through the development of understanding, the dialectic, the third, to reach the truth about reality, second. 2 is to 3 is 3 is to 4. And by the way, it might be worth also making a map of what it feels like to go through that process. Oh, that's the ox-herding pictures. So that second hypothesis, as it feels like to be experienced, you could say is the 8th ox-herding picture. A nice story, a nice picture of a man and his ox. A nice poem to talk about what it feels like. What do you encounter? What's the state of mind? How does it function for you? And by the way, is there a trap door in the ceiling to lead you up to the next stage? That's the ox-herding pictures. By the way, what's encountered? What does it feel like? How does it function? How does it conclude? That's the dialectic. So we can also use the dialectic to understand each of those oxiding pictures. Again, showing us why the dialectic is the meaning of life. And the meaning of life, meaning because it's the mean analogy. The mean analogy that allows for movement or development. So as these are spiritual stages that can be put in the oxiding pictures, and there are stages of understanding and cognitive development, we can say it's both the spiritual and educational or learning model, the dialectic, same. Oh, and also we saw that it makes use of what makes us evolved, ousia and logos, allow for our evolution. And it can be applied to, so therefore it's the spiritual method, the learning or educational method, and also the evolutionary method. But didn't we also say it not only accounts for individual souls, learning, evolution, spirituality, but cultures? So it's the political system. It's the model for understanding how to understand societies and how they relate and how they can improve and the problems they can face, why they're in the problems they're facing, by identifying the kind of hypothesis they're in and what they would need for their development and growth. So it ticks all the boxes. So really seeing how it's the mean analogy, dialectic. The third hypothesis. Oh, by the way, are we benefiting by spiritually evolving, by learning, by evolving, by spiritual growth, by learning or education? Do we benefit? Do we benefit by evolving? Do we benefit by solving our cultural problems and becoming a rational, harmonious race? Oh, we do. What's that called? Providence. So, the way of understanding the mean analogy, or the third hypothesis, is providence and dialectic. Or rather, dialectic is not only the meaning of life for those interested in evolution, learning, spiritual development, or living in a sane world, it's also the method of providence. How we bestow care, solve problems, and allow for development. So, remove what's false, perfect what's true. Purification and perfection. So the dialectic is how we care. Providence and dialectic necessarily connected. That's the third hypothesis. Pretty neat. So there's a little response to our friend yesterday who asked, how does math fit in with philosophy? Math from philosophy, or top down, allows us to see a set of necessary numbers needed for creation, for there to be existence, for there to be the second hypothesis. That also ends up being the necessary set of numbers for the male and female, odd and even, expression of the three kinds of mean analogies, geometric, arithmetic, and harmonic, that allow us to understand definitionally the kinds of unfolding and the kinds of movements a soul makes within the map of the hypotheses, experienced in the map of the oxiding pictures for our soul's learning development, without which we would be living in a cruel, sadistic universe. If we were just blind sufferers of our fate without a possibility for learning and growth, then it would be a very stupid universe. And we know, because we can participate in intelligence, ousia and logos, that it ain't. Can't be. So necessarily, we need these necessary number set to understand the necessary kinds of learning a soul goes through, without which we would be living in an absurd, nonsensical reality. Nonsensical because, well, absurd and nonsensical because how can there be this great intelligence functioning and creating this world, creating the principles that exist in our physical world and maintaining them, while being too stupid to allow for awakening evolving species like us to change and grow and escape our problems and reach our highest purpose, escape fate and reach our purpose or destiny. Can't fit. Nonsensical. You can make a joke about that. This is how crazy it would be for there to be this super amazing, caring intelligence, caring and intelligent enough to create every moment the way it does. But is too stupid to allow for souls to become like itself. Oh, the book of Genesis. There is some supposedly benevolent, caring God who wants to punish Adam and Eve for the sin of wanting to gain knowledge of good and evil. It's a fucking joke. It's a joke. You can add to the joke that in the book of Genesis, God is depicted, the Christian God is depicted as one of many gods. So it's a polytheistic religion, and this particular God is jealous, a liar, lies about what will happen to them, vindictive, participates in punishment, which we know, even as non-gods, that's a stupid thing. And yet, the story claims it to be the highest, most caring and loving thing. The snake tells the truth, not God. So you could see that, if you read it properly, as an absurd depiction of what follows in a cruel, sadistic world created by some divine intelligence. Doesn't make sense. Again, showing us the absurdity. So that would be, you could take the book of Genesis, therefore, as a negative side of the dialectic. What follows if there wasn't learning? If there wasn't growth and change? If there wasn't the third hypothesis? Notice that absurd story is used to justify ignorant belief, the fourth hypothesis. How does the fourth hypothesis function? Belief functions in opposition to understanding. Because if you understood something, you wouldn't have to believe the tyrant who wants to make you their slave, be them a politician, a capitalist, billionaire, a rabbi, imam, preacher, cult leader. They all want to stop you from understanding. What does the right wing do? Shuts down education. I like the uneducated, says Trump. By design. Our purpose, therefore, is to move from the fourth to the third. To understand the cause of our human problems and ignorance, the fourth hypothesis, and make the arithmetic movement using the necessary number set to go from 4 to 3. Pretty neat. Do we mention this book is a goddamn banger?
Jesus Christ, Emma, this is not Opie and Anthony or whatever.
They're completely lying to you.
Brain rot escalate.
The hell's wrong with you people? You sick freaks.
Come on, you 6 freaks. Stop arguing. R.M. Brown and Emma are arguing.
It's a guy whose head appears to be on backwards, and then a half lady.
A half lady? What's
Please
that?
end kink shaming on your
Disgusting.
Never.
I'm so disgusted.
Never.
Personality maxing requires you to look inward on a deeper level, and it's harder to fix because then you have to make fundamental changes to who you are as a person, and it's because it feels like a much more core component of themselves that they don't want to change. Like, it's like, well, then if I change this, who am I?
So that quote from the Oracle is a nice summary of what we just explained. We are personality maxing, which is changing our way of being, feeling, and functioning, which is difficult because all of those things have as its necessary source an idea of self. The more we are identified with a false idea of self, which is belief or pathologos, the fourth hypothesis, the more difficult it is to make that change. So our movement through the hypotheses is personality maxing, or changing our idea of the self. And that has to happen in 2 ways. Through understanding these hypotheses and the movement through them, as well as understanding our own personal expression of our pathologos fourth hypothesis beliefs. So the more that we're attached to our beliefs or ignorance, the harder it is for us to change. That's easy to see in the world. The people who are identified with their racist shit, it's harder for them to become non-racist. If you feel like, well, if you grow up in a world where you will be literally stoned to death if you weren't a Muslim or a Christian, then it's hard to change from a Christian or Muslim. You would say, I am a Christian, not, there is this theory that some dude told me, I'm going to carry it as a hypothesis. That would be a sane way of doing. But they don't want that, they want you to identify with it. So, personality maxi. Difficult because you have to change your idea of self, but that's specifically what we're here to do. So, we have been, oh my goodness, I was fucked this morning. So we've been learning about how Socrates has gone through that process himself, and he reviewed these hypotheses a few times for us. And he asked us to review those hypotheses and see how they fit within our hierarchy of philosophers. So we did that yesterday. We applied it to all of the philosophers within the lineage that we are in. And what we just did was a summary of it as a principle. Why is the dialectic the meaning of life? Why is it our purpose, necessarily so? So we made several arguments or dialectical arguments to show why the dialectic is the meaning of life. And we expressed it within evolution, within spirituality, within educational learning, within the economic system, within the political system. So there are many, many ways, and that's the thing about seeing. And the more that you practice dialectical expressions of your understanding, the more you make it your own. So while people in the fourth hypothesis, ignorance, think life's about justifying the ignorant beliefs you already carry, debate, that's not what we're here for. We're here to share our highest vision, share our highest understanding through the dialectic, which is how we test it. We're testing our dialectical understanding. We're testing our highest vision. We're helping each other. It's a win-win.
Win, 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 win.
I love this guy.
Thank you. So, that's how we encourage each other. It's not punishment. By the way, human savagery is nothing other than looking for times when you're not perfect. By the way, it's completely hypocritical because no one's perfect. We wouldn't be here if we had a perfect 1, 2, 3 hypotheses. But looking for when others miss the mark and using that to justify inflicting suffering on them. Punishment. You made a mistake, ha ha ha, now I can beat you up or shoot you in the face, or like ISIS is doing, or genocide you as the Israeli Jews are doing. Or put you in prison as the capitalists are doing. Send you to concentration camps as the right wing. Oh, you made a mistake. Hang on a second. What about all the mistakes you make? Shut up about that. What about the Epstein? Shut up. What about all the corruption that the shut up. But what about all of the wars and murders you guys, you billionaires do? Shut up. You didn't, you had the wrong accent. Aha, got you. Now I can torture you and imprison you and kill you or enslave you. Disgusting. Punishment is disgusting. It's built on a lie. By the way, if we've just defined the meaning of life, we've defined the meaning of learning and evolution, we've defined what it means to develop as a species, any culture, does any of that happen through inflicting violence or punishment, which is a lie about the motivation. The true motivation, therefore, of inflicting suffering is not punishment or teaching you a lesson. That's a fucking lie, because you do not understand what learning is. It's the dialectic. And there is no point in the dialectic where you try and get people to focus on you, the punisher. That's the pathologos. Look at me, look at how strong I am. At no point in the dialectic do you focus on your physical body. What does punishment and torture do? Focus on your physical pain. What's the ways of enslavement? Taking away physical needs, housing, food, etc., healthcare. At no point do we want people to feel bad about when they miss the mark. You are literally born here in order to miss the mark, so you can reflect on it, its causes, to find your pathologos. So any kind of punishment is the exact opposite of literally life and its purpose. So any system that encourages belief as a cognitive function, the fourth hypothesis, or any sort of punishment is a sick system that has to be learnt about and removed, replaced with something good and healthy. Isn't that interesting? I think it's interesting. Now, whether or not the rest of the world gets on board and we end up saving our species from the inevitable extinction of the pathologos or not, we can still do our job. We can still learn about it, master the dialectic for our soul, and benefit in our reincarnations too. As a result, so, and on that note, Socrates does say, hey, by the way, I am going to give you an opportunity to practice your understanding of the dialectic, your understanding of these hypotheses we've gone through. Go back through all of the philosophers that we've been talking about and apply this understanding of the hypotheses to recognize their own level of development. And that's what we did last time. Now, last time we applied it to the philosophers in the lineage. Know thyself started the game. 800 BC, Homer gave us two key stories, the stories of Achilles and the story of Odysseus and Penelope. We are just starting to get the translation of this. So it's taken us, what, almost 3,000 years, but we can read it because we're getting an actual translation with the key words. So that's exciting. 500 BC, Xenophanes. We only got a little snippet from him, but a worthwhile one, instructing us to reflect on the whole of seeing, hearing, and thinking while we master the parts in the dialectic. The other person after Homer and Xenophanes comes Parmenides and Diotima. We were talking about them today, giving us the dialectic and its application to benefit souls through ideal relationships. Both of those taught Socrates, and he added the idea of dreams. So that's the lineage. Homer, Xenophanes, Parmenides, Diotima, and Socrates. Then there's the diminishment. Plato dropped the ability to solve problems, dream analysis, and midwifery, but kept the dialectic applied to philosophy. But as a result, you can't complete your journey through the hypotheses unless you're also removing your pathologos. So we took a guess at what level of hypothesis Plato might have reached. Now, hopefully we could also put him in the ox-herding pictures too. Aristotle, fifth hypothesis. Ignorance. Justinian, fourth. The two come together. What's that called? The Third Reich, the Second Reich, the First Reich. The union of church and state, through tyranny and oppression, the Nazis. Fourth and fifth hypothesis, the nature of human ignorance. Modern education. That's where we are in our culture. Those are the figures that are the root causes. What we've been doing. Notice, philosophy is looking at the physical world and seeing the principles that it necessitates. And when we realize the second and the third hypothesis, understanding and providence, that the fact that we have understanding necessitates its source or cause, the second, there to be intelligence itself. And the categories inherent, or the intelligibility or logos inherent in ousia, or the second, necessitates its source self. So it's necessary, definitionally. Equally so, we can look at our current world and see how it necessitates its sources or causes. Aristotle, but having the hypotheses, we can understand why, because he only reached the fifth hypothesis. Why is that? Oh, because his teacher didn't have midwifery and dream analysis, which allows you to address your blocks, fifth hypothesis, and its source or cause, your false beliefs, fourth. Or also, modern education is based on the model of the Latin Church, which is what? Fourth hypothesis, which is human ignorance. Our purpose is to move into the third. The third has kinds of expressions. The dialectic is the third, applied to truth. Oh, Plato has that. But you also have to look down and purify our false beliefs, cause of religion and the cause of materialism. There's Fuckface McGee, Emperor Justinian, and Aristotle.
Unbelievable sluts these days. You have the brain of a child if you think that.
They have the brain of a child.
You're a baby. You're a little baby.
A little baby. So why then did Plato, who started the universities in the West, the academy, and the subsequent teachers, Proclus, Plotinus, and Damascius, only have a partial mastery of the third hypothesis? Or the sixth ox herding picture? Why were they only able to sing a few songs on the ox? Because we killed Socrates before he was able to midwife his student, because he was only 20. And he wasn't able to write. He was in the process of writing. So we can see why we're in the bind culturally, and spiritually, and educationally, etc. So it seems that all of these people, Homer, Xenophanes, well, Homer we don't know because we haven't got into those texts yet, but Xenophanes we don't know much about as well, but Parmenides, Diotima, and Socrates seems to have reached the first hypotheses, but there's a question: if Socrates added dreams, is there a stage beyond the first? And if Parmenides said he had to go down to give his speech, is there maybe two stages above the first? So we've got some questions, but we are able to understand where all of these people have reached. And of course, the fact that we can play the game now and we're not bound to human extinction in the tradition of Aristotle and Justinian, to whom we say...
Unbelievable sluts these days.
No, it's not even a slut.
Oh, fuck.
We say, oh, fuck, damn. It's because we have this guy here, Pierre Grimes, who rediscovered those things we lost with Socrates, because it's a truth of reality, so it's discoverable. In other words, there is no one philosophy among many. It's not a many philosophy. In other words, if you use your mind to know the mind, you'll rediscover these things. You'll rediscover midwifery, dream analysis, and philosophy. These guys think philosophy is a bunch of opinions.
Die mad about it, bitch.
And they want you to die mad about it.
Fuck.
I think it's so awesome.
No, you would think
It's a total shit show.
It's a shit show if you think that. They think it's just about opinions. That's the difficulty. We have to help people realize that our modern education about philosophy is the exact opposite. It's the fourth hypothesis shit. Philosophy is the third. The fourth functions in opposition to the third. This guy rediscovered it, wrote this book, allowing us to read this book. That's you. So that's the tradition. So we applied our understanding of those hypotheses as stages of soul development to understand these key figures within the story or the lineage we're in. But we can also apply it to the other key figures in the book, which we've been reflecting on to understand the different interpreters of truth. We've got the classes or kinds of negative responses or interpretations, or just interpretations to truth. If you get a new truth, how do you respond to it? Some people simply reject the new and keep the old. Complete chuds. There are someone like Paul who claims to speak for the new while remaining loyal to the old. Wolf in sheep's clothing. What hypothesis would you put Paul in? You can do that yourself. There are people, number 3, who take a piece of the new as a patch on the coat of the old. I'm going to keep this old coat, but I'm going to patch it up with a bit of understanding. That's the Kabbalah, which takes the Parmenides and puts it as a patch on the Sephardic religious tradition. What hypothesis would that be? There are people like Mark, who sees what the wolf in sheep's clothing, like Paul, is doing and rejects Paul, the rejecter of the rejecter. There are someone like the Gospel of John, who supports the rejecter, the bootlickers. What hypothesis are they in? There are those who advance certain parts and ignore other parts. These we've done. We've suggested that Plato maybe has reached the second hypothesis, has a partial mastery of the third, but hasn't, without midwifery and dream analysis, he is still bound by his fourth hypothesis, pathologos beliefs. So we would put him in those. Notice, it's not just one. You can move between them, even though there are different jumps. Number 7, you appear loyal to the old while creating an alternative reading of the literal version of the old, creating an alternative to the literal reading of those old core beliefs. Dionysius, the Areopagite, sneaking in some of the understanding of what? Now, we would have to get into Dionysius's work to see if he's adding the logos, that he's got some of the third. If he recognizes the problem of religion, belief, he has some level of understanding of the fourth and some freedom from the fourth. We can see by his writing, we would be able to see, ideally by his writing, what level of vision or the second has he experienced himself? And has he gone through that to the source? Does he talk about the one self? So if we got into his readings, this is what we would ask. But notice this applies to anyone, whether it's Kant.
Die mad about it, bitch. You have the brain of a child.
It makes sense.
Or Hegel or Nietzsche or any religious figure or anyone, any author. We could and should therefore judge their level of pathologos and their level of logos, both in vision or ousia and understanding or logos of that vision. See how well they're doing. And maybe, if we ever meet the people, have a conversation with them to help them purify their ignorance and perfect their vision and understanding. It's a win-win.
Win.
There is the 8th. People who are fooled. So we could call that a lion in wolf's clothing. Oh, I see these wolves trying to turn humanity into sheep and eat them. These religious fuckers. I'm going to be a lion, a true noble creature with the logos, and pretend to be one of the wolves. There are those who are fooled by the lion and may add to the new, but also tries to synthesize the old and new together. Both sides are. Now, there's some good in religion and there's some good in understanding too. Why not have the 4th and 3rd hypothesis? Now, if he had an understanding of these hypotheses, it would be obvious. The 4th is in opposition to the 3rd. Belief functions as harm or ignorance. providence is in third. So a wolf and lion both sides are, that's Ficino. So of these characters, you could ask the question, what hypothesis are they in? What level of depth? Now, this is an interesting idea as well. It's not just what you're in, but what level of depth or mastery are you in? How far into the ox-herding picture are you? Because the ox-herding pictures we've seen have depth. There is some encounter. There is some state of mind you can develop. So there's a development within the ox-herding pictures. There is some functioning, so you can gain a certain level of mastery of that state of mind to integrate what you've encountered to function. And there is some conclusion that is like a prequel of the next stage, prequel of the sequel. Notice, it's the dialectic. What do you encounter definitionally? Have you integrated it into your state of mind or functioning, demonstration, definition, demonstration? As your state of mind, can you function through that state of mind in divisions? And as a result of that, have you seen enough, gained enough mastery? So there's each of these stages themselves have levels of depth that you can go through. So you could expand out each of these levels to see where you're at. Have you gained a certain mastery of divisions that you can relate back to the self in a new kind of way that anticipates the next stage? So there are depth. For instance, we've seen that these guys here, that at number 6 interpreters take certain parts but ignore others, have a level of the third hypothesis understanding in the philosophy dialectic, but don't have midwifery. They can't look down at the fourth and purify your beliefs. And they don't have the highest expression, dream analysis. So a level of depth within the third. That's very important as well, because the ox-herding pictures start with 2 levels of ignorance. So going back to these hypotheses, if ignorance is the 4th and 5th hypothesis, as well as all of these negatives, 6, 7, 8, 9, these 1, 2, 3, these 6 hypotheses are incorporated in the first 2 ox-herding pictures. The third ox-herding picture is a glimpse. So it's the second ox-herding picture. So the second hypothesis is in the third ox-herding picture, and the 4th, and the 5th, and the 6th, and the 7th, culminating in its highest experience in the 8th. So we have one hypothesis that's broken down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stages in the ox-herding picture. And within each of these stages, we've just seen there are 4 parts that you develop through. So there's stages of development within each of these 6, which apply to first hypothesis. And within these 4 stages of development, you can equally have stages of development within them. So you can break it down into smaller and smaller maps using the dialectic. That's important, because to say, well, Plato is in the 4th hypothesis. Sorry. Plato is in the 3rd hypothesis, having understanding, is not the same as Diotima, who has a much deeper... much deeper level of understanding. Understanding is the 3rd. Whoops. But they have different depths. That's one of the significances that we can see in the ox-herding picture, which gives greater depth of experience and development of, well, not just the second, because they incorporate 2nd and 3rd together. While you have a glimpse in the 3rd ox-herding picture, a glimpse of the ox, it ends with, how can one nail it down? How can an artist nail it down? That's the 3rd. So you've had a glimpse, but then you go down to the 3rd. Well, it's not really a down. You take your understanding and you integrate it. And in each of these oxiding pictures, there is the use of understanding, the third, to purify your false beliefs or ignorance, fourth hypothesis, and perfect your experience, second hypothesis. Isn't that interesting? So while there is a map of 9 hypotheses, 10 if we include the pathologos, 11 and 12 if we add a couple more above the first, for maybe Socrates. But basically, this map of 9, there are stages or levels of mastery, of perfection and purification in each of them, which the oxiding pictures gives us insight into. So, take all that yourself and apply it to those different key characters in the history of the battle between understanding and belief, Hellenic understanding, Judaic belief, or Socrates and Jesus, that conflict between our pathologos ignorance of belief, venerated in religion, and our purpose to master through the dialectic, the logos, or understanding. Those characters who are in that story, different interpreters, Paul, John, Mark, the Kabbalah, Dionysius, Ficino. Do it yourself, have a go. Where would you put them? That's what Socrates has asked us to do. Now, I'm going to get my drink and I'll be back and we'll continue to read. Let's jump in. We did cover much ground. Let's bring in our characters. We did cover much ground and included many ideas. And there are some we left out, didn't we? Maybe the 10, 11, 12 hypotheses? We need to go back, review them, and see how they may fit into our hierarchy of philosophers. As we've been doing, and there are some more that you can do. And we just talked about the interpreters. Are there any you think important to review that we failed to mention? Jesus. Yes. There is another 2 who we need to review. We have overlooked him. Sorry, there is another who we need to review. We have overlooked him. Reflecting in his way, he has brought to mind another philosopher. Sorry, reflecting in this way. My back's pretty bad today. He has brought to mind another philosopher whose teacher was Hypatia, who joined the church and became a bishop. I do believe you have heard of him. Yes, the mere mention of her name, says Socrates, brings delight into my heart. You must be thinking of Synesius the Alexandrian. Ooh. Here is a truly remarkable philosopher who did a study of dreams. Wow. Wow. Our first philosopher, other than Socrates, who didn't write it down, to do some work on dreams. Oh, and of course Pierre Grimes done a lot of work on dreams. This is big. Are you familiar with that work on dreams? I learned he was one of those who became a part of the church, while remaining one of yours. So maybe a both sides are like Ficino. Keep saying Ficini.
Kant's a little fucking bitch.
I know. Thanks for reminding me.
You just attacked my person. You just harmed my body.
No, she said can't.
I've been a bad little girl.
You know, and Emma, maybe. I know that Hypatia often visits around here in heaven, I guess, and that she has joined the contemplative group high above Mount Athos. Wow, this is new in the book. We're developing more environment or place or setting. In the book, apparently we have a place where these kinds of dialogues are happening, where we are, but we also have a Mount Athos, where Mount Athos, where Hypatia goes, and there's a contemplative group hanging out there, which is interesting. That in this afterlife experience, that apparently, so this book begins by saying, let's have a look. Introduction and a forward. It's called forward because I skipped forward. Another introduction by Jeffrey Mishlove. If you like him, you can find some interviews with Pierre Grimes on Jeffrey Mishlove's YouTube channel called New Thinking Aloud. Among the rolling hills here there is a meadow where souls of those who have recently died meet and discuss their former life on Earth. It is here that they greet those souls coming down from heaven and up from the house of Hades. Oh, so a kind of mean term. After they greet old friends and relatives, tears flow and laughter follows as they share their stories. Then they settle down for the presentation of a play that is not a play. It continuously plays from the beginning for each soul. It can be stopped and started any time a soul wishes to pause and reflect on any part of this strange play, as we have been doing as we've been reading it all the way through. Even before the play unfolds, opposing voices are heard and raise troubling doubts and deep concerns about the ideas presented in the play itself. So there's the chorus, the hater, and the anti-chorus that claps back. So it's a place between heaven and hell, or House of Hades we've been reflecting on, might reflect our planet Earth, where we can meet and talk and reflect. Interesting. Now, I don't know whether there is a place of reflection between this life and the reincarnation, considering we have been hearing that when people die, they experience the second hypothesis or eighth oxiding picture luminosity, and to the extent to which they can endure that and the depth that they can experience that, and ideally through understanding, recognize and integrate that, is, integrate probably not the right word, but the depth that they can experience and endure that determines the kind of character they will have in their reincarnation. And of course, what we have been learning is there are footprints that the ancients walk through that brilliant light of the eighth oxiding picture through to the other side to escape the prison of reincarnation. Or, now, we've also been learning that it's not, well, the reincarnation is down into Hades, because if you've ever had any awareness of planet Earth, it's ruled almost completely by the most ignorant, pathologos-ridden people. So it's ruled by injustice. And people are identified with their pathologos shadows that play themselves out on planet Earth. So this might be what is referred to as Hades. Now, heaven has been used by these dudes as Come on, guys. By these dudes as, especially Jesus, as a metaphor for divine luminosity. Socrates has been trying to get him to wonder about what's on the other side of that. The first hypothesis, or the ninth oxiding picture, but he's having some trouble. Not so interested. So Hades could be earth and heaven could be divine luminosity. So I'm not sure whether there is a place between them for reflection and to participate in this kind of reading or play. But there is on Hades, there is in earth. This is what we do here. If you can find a community of friends who are interested in this kind of thing, what they are talking about that happens in some mean place, you can make. That's the idea of this stream and podcast. A place where we can review and pause and reflect on this play together and learn what we need to learn to facilitate our growth, evolution, learning, spiritual development, but also to reincarnate in a positive way, or not down into Hades anymore. So that's pretty much all we have about the setting. Some sort of mean place. Like mean term place, not mean as in nasty. And already we get the idea of the basic metaphors: Jerusalem versus Athens, Judaic culture, Hellenic culture, belief, understanding, ignorance and suffering, understanding and wisdom. It's trapped in a prison of problems and chains of problems and the cycle of reincarnations, the freedom from problems, and the transcendence of reincarnation, fate, destiny, or purpose. So, pretty, black and white, cut and dry, pretty apt analogies. Fuck my back, man, Jesus.
You have the brain of a child if you think that.
Jesus is gonna come down and wipe this place out. Who cares?
Who cares? No, not that bad, but back's very sore today. So other than that, basic environmental setting, how can I fix my back? Okay, I'm gonna pause and do some stretches. Be right back. All right, back. So other than that, basic introduction to the setting and the use of setting to define analogically belief versus understanding, Athens versus Judea. This is the first introduction of anything else. So in this mean place, there is this Mount Athos, where a bunch of homies meet up in a contemplative group high above Mount Athos. Jesus continues. Oh shit, I'm in the wrong page. Whoops.
You sick fuck.
Hey, calm down. There they are. I wondered how Cynicis was able to retain his hold on philosophy while fulfilling his role as a bishop. Yes, seeing as they are antithetical. In principle, by understanding their different cognitive functions in their hypotheses and how they function. He was reported to have said he had accepted much of the teachings of the church when it did not violate what he found to be true. So, still very much attached to his beliefs. From what I have learned, he said that if he was called to the priesthood, he would declare before God and man that he would refuse to preach dogmas in which he didn't believe. He made it clear that even the idea of resurrection was to him nothing but a sacred and mysterious allegory. Well, partial credit. We know now that it was there is no resurrection in the story of Jesus. That was added 200 years later by the church. Made up bullshit. No Easter. So tell that as you snatch the chocolate eggs away from the kids. Eat them all yourself. No Easter egg for you, because it was a lie to distract from the actual meaning of the story. Address your false beliefs, otherwise it'll end in disaster. Then go, they need all the Easter eggs.
Hey, you can't say that to her. You show her some respect.
Never.
I've been a bad little girl.
That's why. All right. Okay. Right. Jesus. There is little doubt about his views, but he did make clear that he considered himself to be a philosopher. Yes, indeed, he said clearly that he didn't wish to be anything but a philosopher. He said it simply and directly. Pardon me, would you recall for me what he said about the importance of dreams? Well, yes, please. He surely stands apart from the other philosophers if he makes dreams not only important, but essential to the spiritual life. That's what we have been doing. By recognizing that in the expressions of the dialectic we're here to master as the necessary meaning of life, we have the reading and the perfection of truth in philosophy. We have the purification of what's false, but we recognize that in order to do both of those things, we need some assistance by some providential intelligence that can help us recognize the things that we're overlooking. That's the dream analysis that does both. We've also put a dream analysis within the causes. So what's the meaning of life? Or why are we here? The causes. There's a material reason, there's an activity reason, there's a functioning reason, there's a model or paradigm reason, and then there's that for the sake of which, or the first and final cause. So that in the physical world, what we can do is try to perfect our soul through the reading that we're doing here. Therefore, the greatest kind of material soul we can be is one that seeks the Logos, seeks understanding, and to be ruled by the Logos, not ruled by your desires or your whims or your ignorance or your family tradition or any of that shit. So the greatest activity we can do is read these books we're reading. Reading Logos books. The greatest activity is to talk about it and reflect on it with our friends, giving us the reflection, Aphrodite, Usia, and Apollo, the words, the Logos. If we do that, we'll discover the model, the discovery of the inherent intelligibility of the Logos, the dialectic. We'll realize that, hang on a second, this book, our thinking, Socrates, the author, all think within a certain structure that reflects the structure of reality, just like Socrates' musician friend, who was able to follow the structure of the Logos applied to music. That's the dialectic. So that the reason we read is to learn about and master the dialectic. So we've said, well, that's the meaning of life then. The greatest activity. Hang on a second. Once we've discovered the dialectic, don't you want to use it? So as the soul receptive to the Logos, so too the mind receptive to the dialectic. Therefore, the activity we can do is midwifery and philosophy. The dialectic to reach truth, and the dialectic applied to surfacing our false ideas of self, mind, and understanding. 1, 2, 3 hypothesis. As well as reflecting on the dialectic as we go to realize we are gaining benefit, providence, or caring from dialectic. Therefore, it's not just the skill that we're here to master, it's an art because it can benefit in the highest way. Therefore, the meaning of life. See, notice how we're answering the meaning of life question, but we're upgrading, we're leveling up. through a hierarchical system of causes. Our greatest functioning would be of the dialectician to facilitate that. Or the 8th oxiding picture, riding the bull, singing the tunes for the woodsman, the rustic tunes of the woodsman and the village children. But hang on a second. For there to be the inherent intelligibility of being, ousia, and its inherent logos, there has to be some cause of that. That's the second hypothesis, or the 8th oxiding picture. So we've gone from our functioning in the third hypothesis, understanding, to its model, the second, understanding and knowing. The two together we call wisdom. So, after recognizing the significance of the dialectic as the meaning of life in all of the ways we've reflected on today, and reflecting on the benefit we get from participating in it, we might be on the lookout for the greatest example of the dialectician, the dream master. Now we can see the significance of our dreams. Notice, you can easily dismiss the significance of your dreams in a million different ways, and trust me, I've met a lot of people who dismiss them in all sorts of ways. But if you see the significance of the dialectic, because of this development, you won't be fooled any longer. Therefore, the greatest activity we can participate in is the dialectic applied to dream analysis. So here we have a place for dream analysis as not only important, but essential. Why? Because while reading perfects our understanding and logos of soul, dialectic perfects our dialectical or intelligent functioning of mind, dream analysis perfects our self, giving us that 1, 2, 3 hypotheses. So as we've been saying of all these philosophers, like Socrates is in the third hypothesis, but there are stages within. There are stages of development within each of these hypotheses. We can narrow it down with these causes. If this is the functioning of the soul through reading, this is the functioning of the mind through dialectic, and this is the functioning of the self through dream analysis and dream creation. We've got our triad or threesome.
Kant's a little fucking bitch.
Of threesome.
Gooners.
Oh my goodness. Of self. Therefore, if that's the greatest activity, dream analysis, and reflecting on the dream maker to realize that we are participating in providence or intelligence and caring, the greatest functioning we are here to master, the greatest thing we can do as a human being is dialectic and dream analysis. Therefore, material cause, activity, or mean cause, functioning cause. But hang on a second, isn't there a paradigm? Is there a method or model that we're following in dream analysis? This method or model or paradigm or blueprint is what the text has been saying we need to make. We need to make a book like the book we've been reading, but for dream analysis, says Socrates. So, if there is a model or oneness or wholeness of being for the dialectic for intelligence, what's the wholeness of self? Knowing the self. To know thyself. What's the that for the sake of which we go through this process? We return to the source or knowing ourself, but along the way we've learned how to read and follow the logos. We've learned how to function through mind as the dialectician, and we've learned how to apply it in the highest way, dream analysis. So we're not just returning to the source or self, but the book says we are the race of humanity ends when we are unified with a greater kind of species. Maybe the dream maker itself, considering its creations, we are doing the dialectic on. What would it like to be functioning as a dream maker yourself? So we have a place of dreams here as the ultimate. So we've got the lesser reading, greater dialectic, ultimate dream analysis cause. The ultimate functioning activity, as humans, as people. Hey, not just humans who dream, so maybe any intelligent species at this level. And we also have it within the basic 3-part dialectic on the dialectic too, dream analysis. So, this isn't anywhere else. This is something we have come to from our work. Hooray for us. Got some in my eye.
Please end kink shaming on your show.
How is getting it in your eye kink shaming? Oh, okay.
Cunt's a little fucking bitch.
I thought so.
Would you just blow in from Stupid Town?
Can't did. So, we've got a place for it. Blah.
I'm always good. And that is what I stand for, being good all the time.
Jesus Christ, Emma, this is not being Anthony or whatever the hell.
That wasn't Emma, but I get your point. So, dreams not only important, but essential. We have that essential element, the highest functioning, and that which perfects our quest to know the self. Other than us, who else is saying that? Oh, this dude here. It is only recently that I learned about the direction that... Who is he? Who are we talking about here? What's his name? Synesius of the Alexandrian. Who is Hypatia, though? Oh, his teacher was Hypatia. And Hypatia is chilling with the contemplative study group above Mount Athos. So we should probably look into what Mount Athos is. I doubt he just added it for fun. Let's take a quick search. Mount Athos is a monastic republic in northern Greece, home to 20 Eastern Orthodox monasteries, in continuous use for 1,000 years, often called the Holy Mountain. It is dedicated entirely to contemplative spiritual life. That's interesting. Governed autonomously under Greek sovereignty. Women are not permitted to enter. The Averton rule. Well, fuck that.
You sick fuck.
Exactly. So, across theology traditions, it's a symbol of radical withdrawal from the physical world, inner purification over external action, depth instead of breadth, transformation by attention, not information. All right. So we can wonder about why Mount Athos is being used to talk about where Hypatia, the philosophical teacher of Synesius the Alexandrian, is hanging out there with those dudes. So he recognized that the resurrection wasn't real, just an allegory. For what? Don't know yet. Wished to be a philosopher. Okay, so he stands apart from the other philosophers, says Jesus, if he makes dreams. So I guess Jesus hasn't seen it yet. By the way, Socrates had to learn the dialectic before he could understand dream analysis. So clearly Jesus wouldn't see the significance of dreams yet. If he makes dreams not only important, but essential to the spiritual life, then he'll stand above the other philosophers, apart from. It is only recently that I learned about the direction he had taken in philosophy. For as you know, I have been absorbed in my contemplations for a period of time, and I have not kept up with such things. So, Jesus is out of the circle. He needs to catch up on the goss. He stressed that dreams are especially significant to those given to philosophy, since they open one to enlightenment. Wow. So those best souls who are in the game of philosophy, or as we've said on the map, the best kind of souls are those seeking philosophy, because philosophy is reading texts that reflect the logos and the dialectic, which can be applied to the self to rank the ideas of self. So the best kind of soul is those reading and talking about philosophy so they can discover the dialectic. To those people who then discover the dialectic and use the dialectic to perfect their mind, they will like dream analysis, says Socrates. Because they are the ones interested in enlightenment. Open to enlightenment, or to recognize that there is a kind of single soul above the many souls, single mind above the many beliefs and opinions, and a single self above all of the many selves. Dreams are especially significant to those given to philosophy, since they open one to enlightenment. Wow. For he found that it was through dreams one can be a receptacle of truth. Ooh. Pure, brilliant, and divine. And he added that it was through this kind of pursuit that one would be able to see the future.
No, you're not the one that's great. You are crossing bounds.
Foresight, prophecy, or maybe other kinds. So through dream analysis, you can gain insight into the future. Very important, says Jesus, words that he passed on, and they need to be reintroduced to those who regard themselves as religious. So Jesus here trying to save the people brought in and duped by religion. So hey, here's a religious guy who also recognized the significance of philosophy and dream analysis. So maybe you should get into that instead of being a little bitch cucked slave of Paul and the fascists who are fucking everything over through religion. Maybe you should get into this, maybe. Good for you, Jesus. Among the things that he covered, what would you say you especially learned about his teaching and practice? Yes, I did learn what I needed to discover, because I wanted to follow those who have a kinship with dreams. Oh. So we talked about Socrates adding to the hypotheses by bringing in dreams. These are the people he's looking for, as they practice their philosophy. So, people who do philosophy and dream work are the sorts of homies Socrates is going to follow. He held that in the continuous study of dreams, continuous study, it's not a one-off. If only we got them every night. Oh, we do. The imagination becomes conjoined with a profound understanding. Holy fuck. Okay, amazing, bangers. Imagination, conjoined, profound understanding, that awakens the divine character. Wow. This is the bumper sticker to end all bumper stickers. Through which intuitive intelligence, the eye of the soul, can be approached and experienced. Woof. The continuous study of dreams. In the continuous study of dreams, the imagination becomes conjoined with a profound understanding. Imagination and understanding. That's interesting. Sounds like a duet of Usia and Logos. Or mind, or knowing and understanding. Imagination becomes conjoined with understanding, and that awakens the divine character. Interesting. Changing your character to more divine. Through which intuitive intelligence, not understanding intelligence, intuitive, all at onceness. Could that be related to foresight or future sight? Intuitive intelligence, the eye of the soul, so that seems to be the eye of the soul. The eye of the soul that we're here to awaken through philosophy and dream work is in kind of intuitive intelligence. That's a part of our divine character that conjoins imagination and understanding, can be approached and experienced. He echoed our own understanding that it is from God that the knowledge of dreams come. Right, we've already seen that. There has to be some profound intelligence, God. For your dreams to know everything about yourself and your development and the future and your past and all that. He made it clear that the gods were not independent floating beings. That's a literal interpretation that we call savagery. Fake theology. They were not independent floating beings, but rather pure intelligences. So there are pure intelligences, more than one, that seems. So he was one of those who saw that dreams were the essential part of the art of divination. Wow. Wow. I call that good. So, some sort of divine character, intuitive intelligence, eye of the soul, also the intelligence of God. But also there are varieties of intelligences within that single God that we could personify as gods, that we can make use of. Imagination, understanding, intuitive intelligence, eye of the soul, the different intelligences, the divine character of God, and the art of divination. I call that good, says Jesus. Did he really believe that it was through dreams that not only philosophers, but all mankind could be visited? All mankind could be visited by pure intelligence and by God. Wow. All intelligence, meaning that there is a way of unifying. Hey, there are these crazy Jewish people, and within Judaism there are all these different crazy little cults and groups doing their all weird little things. There are all these crazy versions of Christianity, all fighting each other and doing their all, some wearing funny underpantses, like the Mormons, some doing all weird shit. There are all sorts of, all these divisions and separations, all at war with themselves and each other. But there is a way. Is there a way of bringing everyone together under not ignorance and savagery, who ends up blowing up the rest of us, but a higher, not just a higher intelligence, but the highest intelligence of God? Well, only if that highest intelligence visits everyone. And my fuck, look at it, look at this, it does.
You just hacked my person.
Dude, suck my dick.
They're secretly turned on by it.
Okay, and we can all be okay.
I'm always good, and that is what I stand for, being good all the time.
I love this guy.
There we go. A way of unifying our whole race, if this is the case. Rhymes. Bars. Socrates. Yes! How are we for time? Alright, it's 2 hours. He was one of those who recognized that dreams come to us all. And they reveal. Dreams come to us all. And they reveal a personal knowledge about our struggles, needed for midwifery. We most desperately need to know, essential for our work in midwifery or purifying problems. I should add that, like us, he held that it was entirely unnecessary to interpret dreams. It's not interpretation or belief crap. Dreams become visible from the depth of their obscurity through the kind of reflection that we both know is the passageway to the divine. What have we been learning all the way through this text? There are two forces at work, Judea and Athens. Belief and understanding. Why is belief the cause of all human problems and suffering? Because it functions as interpretation. You project what isn't there and you're blocked from seeing what is. We have been learning how to move from that one to the good one in learning to read this book. What's the model for reading? It happens to be the model for how the book's written too, and how the dialogue has unfolded, and the model for all providential care, the dialectic. So while interpretation is through belief and the cause of our ignorance and the inevitable tragic consequences that follow, the kind of reflection we have been learning that is the passageway or mean term, therefore mean term for learning, spirituality, evolution, education, governance. The mean term, the meaning of life. So it's not as this Cyaneus guy, is it Cyaneus? What is his name? As this jabroni or homie Synesius says, it's essential, it's needed for our work in purifying our ignorance, midwifery, or as we've seen on the board, the two essential things we're here to do, perfect and purify. Seek the truth of self, mind, and functioning, self, mind, and providence, self, mind, and understanding, self, mind, and dialectic. Remove the false belief about self, false states of mind, and false functioning of pathologos. We need what's for both, we need dream analysis. And then, of course, we can share it to create myths like the Dream Maker. Ooh. So essential. And it ain't by interpretation, it's by the kind of reflection that we both know is the passageway, or the footprints, or the ox in the rope, or the mean analogy, or the meaning of life, the activity, the art we're here to master. The activity of dialectic, dream analysis. The art we're here to master, the dialectic. That's how we do dreams. That's how we read. That's how we relate to people. That's how we solve problems. That's the mean term, the art of the dialectic. Highest application to dreams, through which God itself and all of the kinds of gods communicate to us. Not only that, the application of the dialectic or mean term, applied to our dreams makes us like it, because the continuous study of dreams through the dialectic, of course, which is perhaps why Socrates had to learn the dialectic from Parmenides before he saw the significance of dreams, we can ourselves unify our profound understanding with our imagination to awaken our own divine character, our own intuitive intelligence, our own eye of the soul, awaken it, approach it, experience it, making us like the pure intelligence of God and its kinds of intelligence, the gods, making us like the dream maker and the art of divination, because dreams also know the future. Dreams are especially significant to those in philosophy because these are the ones who are open to enlightenment. Through dreams, one can reach the receptacle of truth. What does that mean? Pure, brilliant, and divine. It's the method. We've been talking about dialectic as the method, but the method of methods is the dialectic applied to dreams. Through dreams, we can reach the receptacle of truth, pure, brilliant, and divine, be able to see the future, or the art of divination. Holy fuck.
Disgusting. I'm wrong. I'm mad about it, bitch. You
No.
just blow in from, oh my fuck. I'm eating
There you
the
go.
testicles of this bull, and I'm eating it raw.
I'm going to get you. I'm going to find you. And I'm going to get you.
Wrong.
Freaks.
Wow, what a banger. What a banger episode. Oh my fuck. Holy crap. What more can be said? We've really seen a lot because of all the work we've been doing. All of the diagrams or maps. All of this stuff on the board. And this is the third board. We've got two other ones of this text. Allowing us to come to these conclusions, see the significance and necessity of dream analysis, why having a place for dream analysis makes us above, what was the word? Above, beyond? Above, apart from the other philosophers, having a place here for dream analysis, having a place here for dream analysis, that we wouldn't have seen the significance of unless we've learnt about the dialectic. So all of this coming together to what a amazing conclusion. The absolute importance, significance, and the highest functioning of mind, dialectic, of understanding can unify our imagination with our most profound understanding to awaken our most divine qualities, divine character, intuitive intelligence, eye of the soul, so long as we are in a continuous study of our dreams. What would that be like? Just do it every day and carry that reflection with you all day. And considering it's from God that the knowledge of dreams come, and the gods were actually pure intelligence so aspects of that intelligence together as a oneness, awaken our own art of divination, and if it visits all of us, hoping for all of us to reach that level of excellence of self, mind, and functioning providence, then it's the highest possible excellence for humanity, but it's also a way of uniting humanity. Not by accepting limits of belief or torture or fascism, but by embracing our highest functioning and purpose, the ultimate of providence, intelligence, and care. Through dreams, not interpretation, no place for belief in the true race of humanity. Only through the kind of reflection that is our passageway to the divine, the dialectic, continual reflection and study of our dreams. Holy fuck beans.
Jesus.
What the hell's wrong with you people?
I'm going to get you.
It's better to come in the sink than to sink in the cum.
Not appropriate for that conclusion.
I'm cute. Like, it's cutie pie.
What a disaster on the soundboard today.
Hey man, wouldn't
Dude, suck my dick.
They're
my
secretly turned on by it.
All right, enough of that.
I'm always good. And that is what I stand for. Being good, all the good, all.
Well, if you're good all the time, I can't blame you for your nonsense sound drops at the end. But oh my god, holy crap, right?
Cool as a cuke.
What do we say?
My head is quite large and filled with secrets.
Now our head is quite large and filled with secrets, but secrets we can share with the world. If this is the way, the new way of being for humanity. What a banger ep today. I hope you had fun. Thank you for joining me. If you want to donate to the channel, that is a help and appreciated. There is a link below. If you want to join the Discord, there's a link below. If you want a PDF to the text, there's a link below. And I will, if you want to join, see the old episodes, past episodes on YouTube, there's a link below. Lots of links below. Follow on Twitch. And I'll see you in the next one. And you can say, not if I see you first with my prophecy because of my relationship with my dreams. And I will say,
No, you're not the one that's mentally unwell. You're brave. You are crossing into new boundaries.
with that joke, you're crossing into new boundaries. See you in the next one. Bye.